I want to tell you about an Easter Sunday. Not the kind with a sunrise service and a ham that comes out perfect and grandchildren running across the yard with baskets. Not that Easter. I want to tell you about the Easter where I stood in my own kitchen at 11:40 in the morning, looking at a table set for 11 people, and watched a text message arrive from my son that told me he wouldn't be coming. My name is Frank DeLuca. I am 64 years old. I spent 31 years working construction management in Pittsburgh, and I have built or overseen the building of more things in this city than most people will ever know about. Bridges, hospitals, a parking garage on Liberty Avenue that nobody thinks about when they park their car, but that I think about every single time I drive past it. I am a man who builds things. I am a man who shows up. I did not understand, for a long time, that not everyone around me operated on the same principle. My wife Alina passed 3 years ago, pancreatic cancer. 8 weeks from diagnosis to the morning I sat in our bedroom alone and understood what silence actually sounds like when it has a shape. 8 weeks. I want to tell you that I handled it with grace and equanimity and all the things people say they'll do when they're not in it yet. I didn't. I handled it the way most men handle the worst thing that's ever happened to them, badly, quietly, and mostly alone. Alina was the one who did Easter. I want to be precise about that. It wasn't my holiday to manage. It was hers completely, unapologetically, with the kind of ownership she brought to everything she loved. She started planning in February. The menu was handwritten every year in the same blue spiral notebook she kept in the kitchen drawer between the takeout menus and the extra batteries. Roast leg of lamb with rosemary and garlic, scalloped potatoes, green beans with almonds. Her mother's recipe for Easter bread, the kind with the hard-boiled eggs baked right into the dough. And the cake, a lemon cake with ricotta frosting that she had been making for 32 years, and that I have never once seen fully survive a DeLuca family Easter. 11 people around that table was the number. It had always been 11. Alina, me, our son Ryan, and whoever he was with at any given year, my brother Sal and his wife Jenna, Alina's sister Marie and her husband Tony, their 2 kids who are now adults but who I still picture at 10 and 12 years old running through our backyard. 11. That was the Easter number. The first Easter after Alina was gone, I didn't do it. I went to Sal's house and sat at someone else's table and ate someone else's lamb and let Jenna talk to fill the space and went home at 8 o'clock and sat in the dark for a while. Nobody said anything wrong. It just wasn't right. It was a good dinner. It wasn't Easter. The second Easter, Ryan and his wife Jenna offered to host. Ryan is 36. He married Jenna Callahan about 4 years ago. Nice girl, organized, the kind of woman who keeps color-coded calendars and sends Christmas cards in November. I like Jenna fine. I want to be fair about that. She comes from a family that does things a certain way, and the way they do things involves her mother, Patricia Callahan, who is a woman of strong opinions and stronger scheduling preferences. But Ryan's hosting that year went fine. The food was good. There were only 7 of us, but it was warm enough, and I came home feeling something that wasn't quite right, but wasn't quite wrong either. This year, the third Easter without Alina, I decided I was going to do it. Not as a tribute, not as a gesture. I was going to do it because she would have done it, because the table deserved to be set and the kitchen deserved to smell like rosemary, and because there is a version of grief that looks like stopping, and I had been stopping long enough. I found her blue notebook in January. It was exactly where she always kept it, between the takeout menus and the extra batteries. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time with it in my hands before I opened it. Then I opened it and there was her handwriting, neat, practical, slightly slanted the way it always was, and the lamb recipe on the 3rd page with the little note she'd written to herself in the margin. More garlic than you think. That's right. That's always right. I called Ryan in February, told him we were doing Easter at my house this year, the full dinner, everyone. He said, "Great, Dad, sounds good," said Jenna was on board, said they'd be there. I called Sal and Jenna, Marie and Tony, counted heads, 11 same as always. Sal offered to bring wine and I told him to bring the good stuff because that's what a leaner always said. He laughed. That felt right. I spent 3 Saturdays before Easter sourcing what I needed. Found a lamb at a butcher in the Strip district who looked at me like I knew what I was doing when I described exactly what I wanted, and I let him think that because Alina knew what she was doing and her notebook was very specific. I practiced the Easter bread twice. First attempt was wrong, too dense, egg placement off. Second attempt was better. I called Marie to ask about her mother's specific instructions, and she got quiet on the phone for a moment, and then told me, and I think we were both feeling the same thing on the same line at the same time. Easter Sunday. I was up at 5:30. The lamb went in at 7. The bread was already done. I'd made it Saturday so it could rest the right way. The potatoes were prepped. The kitchen smelled like garlic and rosemary and something else I don't have a word for, something that smelled like the house when she was in it. By 10 o'clock I had the table set. White tablecloth, her tablecloth, the good one from the cedar chest. The plates we only used for this. The cloth napkins folded the way she folded them. 11 places. I stood in the doorway of the dining room and looked at it and felt something that I think was close to her. Not her, close to her. My phone was on the kitchen counter. At 11:42 it buzzed. Ryan. I looked at the notification. A text message, not a call, a text message. Hey Dad, really sorry about this. Jenna's mom kind of surprised us with an Easter brunch at her place this morning, and it's already going longer than expected. I don't think we're going to make it for dinner. Really sorry. Save me some lamb. I read it once, read it again, set the phone face down on the counter. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment because I think it matters. I did not feel rage. I did not feel the hot, immediate thing that makes a man want to pick up the phone and say things he can't take back. What I felt was something quieter than that, and in some ways harder to carry. I felt the specific, particular weight of having cooked my dead wife's Easter dinner for a table that was about to be missing two people who were. At that moment, at a brunch they had known about when they told me they'd be here. Because here is the thing I understood standing at that kitchen counter on Easter Sunday. Jenna's mother's brunch was not a surprise. Patricia Callahan does not do surprises. Patricia Callahan does not do anything without 3 weeks of deliberate scheduling and color-coded calendar management. That brunch had been on Jenna's calendar when Jenna told me they'd be at my table. The surprise was not Patricia's. The surprise was mine. I set the phone back on the counter, checked on the lamb. It was perfect. The doorbell rang at noon. My neighbor Walt Greer, 70 years old, retired railroad inspector, widower of 6 years, was standing on my porch with a bottle of red wine and an expression that said he wasn't entirely sure if he was welcome but had come anyway. Walt lives 3 houses down. We have had a standing arrangement for 2 years where I check on him on Tuesdays and he checks on me on Thursdays, and neither of us calls it what it is. I could smell it from the sidewalk, he said. The rosemary. I looked at him. You eaten, he said he hadn't. I stepped back and opened the door wider. By 12:30, Sal and Gina had arrived. Marie and Tony. Marie's daughter with her boyfriend. A tall, quiet kid named Brendan who shook my hand properly and helped carry dishes without being asked. Walt sat at the end of the table where I had set a place, and he fit there the way things fit when they are meant to. We were 9 instead of 11. The lamb fed everyone twice. The Easter bread had been made right. The lemon cake lasted approximately 14 minutes after it was set on the table, which Alina would have considered a complete and total success. Sal made a toast. He said Alina's name. He said she would have loved today. He said she would have added more garlic. The table laughed. I let myself laugh too. At 2:15, Ryan texted again. How's dinner going? Hope it's great. Sorry we missed it. I did not respond. Walt and I were the last ones at the table. Everyone else had gone to the living room, the comfortable overflow that always happens at the end of a meal, when conversation has spread itself out too wide to stay contained. We sat there in the quiet of the dining room with the remnants of the meal around us and the last of Sal's wine in our glasses. "You knew," Walt said, not a question. "About Jenna's mother," he nodded. "I suspected," I said. "I didn't ask because I didn't want to give either of us the chance to negotiate around it." Walt looked at the empty chairs at the other end of the table. "What are you going to do?" I looked at them too. Two empty chairs. Eleanor's end of the table and the two places I had set for Ryan and Jenna. Eleanor's chair I had set on purpose. I want to be honest about that. I set it and put a small bunch of rosemary from the garden on the plate. That was for her. The other two were set in good faith, and good faith had been returned with a text message 19 minutes before dinner. "I'm going to do what needs doing," I said. Walt nodded, drank his wine. "She would have known what to do," he said, meaning Eleanor. "She would have set the chairs back at the table in the basement and never mentioned it again," I said. "And then the next year she would have made 11 places anyway because that's who she was." "And you?" Walt asked. "I'm a different kind of man," I said, and that was the end of that conversation. I want to tell you that what came after was dramatic, that there was a confrontation, a scene, an explosion. There wasn't. That's not how I operate. What there was a Tuesday morning, 3 days after Easter, when I drove downtown to my attorney's office and had a conversation about the commercial properties I own, 2 buildings in the Lawrenceville neighborhood, properties I've held for 18 years, and that I had always intended to leave to Ryan as part of his inheritance. My attorney is a man named Gene Pfeiffer. He's been my attorney for 22 years. He sat across from me and listened without interrupting, the way good attorneys do, and when I was done he took off his glasses and said, "Frank, you're sure?" I told him I'd been sure since 11:42 on Easter Sunday. He put his glasses back on and we went to work. Ryan wouldn't be losing everything. I want to be clear about that because I'm not a man who acts from spite. What Ryan would be losing was the assumption. The quiet, comfortable, never-examined assumption that the things I had built over a lifetime of 6 a.m. wake-ups and late bids and sight walks in January cold were simply going to pass to him because he was my son, and that is how these things work. That assumption, as of Easter Sunday, was no longer operative. The buildings would be restructured into a charitable trust, a portion designated to the Eleanor DeLuca Scholarship Fund, something I had been thinking about for a year and not acted on because grief moves slowly when you're also carrying everything else. A portion to Sal's kids, who had been at that table for 30 years and who I trusted in ways I was still calculating. The rest handled with the kind of care and precision that my wife applied to everything she touched. Ryan called me the following Saturday. Normal call. Asked how I was doing, mentioned they'd had a good Easter at the Callahans, said Patricia made a great spread. I listened. I said that sounded nice. I said our dinner was good too. I said the lamb came out right. I didn't mention Gene Pfeiffer. I didn't mention the trust. I didn't mention anything because nothing was final yet, and I am not a man who announces intentions, only results. What I did mention at the end of the call was this. I said, "Ryan, your mother used to say that the measure of a family isn't what they do at Christmas. It's what they do at Easter. Easter is the one where nobody has to perform. Nobody's watching. You just come or you don't." A pause. She was usually right about those things. Ryan said yeah. Said Mom always had a way of putting things. Said he'd talk to Jenna about next year, try to get ahead of Patricia's scheduling earlier so there weren't conflicts. I said that sounded like a good plan. I said good night, I hung up. I went to the kitchen, made myself a cup of coffee, stood at the window that looks out over the backyard, the yard where Eleanor planted the rosemary that still comes back every spring, stubborn and fragrant and entirely unbothered by the fact that she's no longer here to tend it. Here is what I want you to understand about what I did. It was not punishment. It was not revenge. It was the act of a man who spent 33 years watching a woman pour herself into the people she loved completely, without scorecard, without announcement. without ever once making the people she loved feel the cost of what she gave them, and who finally understood that the greatest disservice he could do to her memory was to keep absorbing, quietly and without consequence, the choice that had been made on Easter Sunday. Some things have to cost something, not because you want them to hurt, but because things that cost nothing are treated accordingly. The Aliner DeLuca Scholarship Fund opened in September of that year. First recipient was a girl from Carrick named Sophia, studying civil engineering at Pitt. I went to the small ceremony they held, sat in the back, didn't introduce myself until afterward, and when I did, Sophia shook my hand and said she knew the name, that her aunt had gone to school with Aliner. I drove home on the parkway with the windows down even though it was getting cold. The city was doing what Pittsburgh does in September, turning gold and stubborn and absolutely certain of itself. Aliner would have loved the scholarship idea. She would have read Sophia's application 3 times and written notes in the margins. And she would have absolutely, without question, added more garlic to the lamb. I know that, I will always know that. Next Easter, I am making 11 places. Walt is getting a permanent seat, and if Ryan and Jenna show up, they'll find their chairs exactly where they've always been. Because I am my wife's husband, and we don't remove the chair. We just finally let people decide for themselves whether they're going to sit in it. That, in the end, is the only kind of mercy that means anything.